Let's start with number 11. The gutweight press in several medieval and early modern cultures. A brutal punishment involved placing progressively heavier weights on the victim's abdomen. Known in some records as the gutweight press, the method exploited the body's most vulnerable soft tissues. The prisoner was laid flat on a wooden board, arms and legs restrained so movement was impossible. Executioners then stacked stones, sandbags, or metal plates directly over the stomach. The pain did not come suddenly. This was a punishment designed for slowness. As the weight increased, the diaphragm struggled to expand, breathing grew tight, and the abdominal wall strained under pressure. The digestive organs, intestines, stomach, and liver were gradually compressed, causing waves of nausea, spasms, and a suffocating internal pressure. Authorities used this punishment for two reasons: to extract confessions or as a public display of power. The victim remained fully conscious while their body fought against the crushing force. Sometimes the weights were increased in stages over hours, letting the prisoner mentally anticipate each next edition. What made the gutweight press terrifying was its deceptive simplicity. No blades, heat, or whips, just weight. To bystanders, it looked nearly harmless, but inside the body, everything was collapsing. The slow deterioration of breath and abdominal function was enough to break even hardened warriors. In many cases, the goal wasn't death but submission, which made the torment drag even longer. It showed how medieval punishments didn't need complexity to be horrifying. Sometimes, the human body's own fragility was enough. Before we jump into next method, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. 10. The stomach stir. This punishment was recorded in certain ancient and nomadic cultures where interrogators believed fear worked best when aimed at the core of the body, the stomach. Known in some chronicles as the stomach stir, it involved forcing the prisoner into a tightly bound seated position so the abdominal muscles remained contracted. A long, blunt rod, never sharp, was then pressed and twisted against the lower belly. Although it did not puncture the skin, the internal effect was agonizing. The rod pressed deep into the abdomen, targeting the soft tissues of the intestines. The pressure made the digestive tract cramp uncontrollably, triggering violent internal spasms. The victim felt as if their insides were being knotted and twisted, even though the exterior remained unbroken. Interrogators favored this method because it allowed physical domination without leaving obvious marks. In societies where confessions mattered more than appearances, this was ideal. The twisting motion forced the abdominal organs to shift painfully, and the inability to straighten the torso made the sensation far worse. What made the stomach stir uniquely cruel was the psychological effect. Victims reported a terrifying sensation of losing control of their own bodies. Sharp cramps, sudden contractions, and waves of nausea made staying conscious difficult. Yet, because the punishment was non-lethal, it could be repeated for several days. The stomach stir was less about inflicting visible damage and more about overwhelming the body's core instincts. Pain in the abdomen is primal, triggering survival panic. Ancient punishers understood this well, turning human biology itself into a weapon. 9. The intestinal heat box. In some regions of Central and Eastern Europe, prisoners were subjected to a device called the heat box, a chamber designed to concentrate warmth directly onto the stomach and lower torso. The victim was placed inside a wooden enclosure with only their head exposed. Beneath the box, glowing coals or heated stones provided intense, rising heat. Unlike open-fire punishments, the heat box worked through trapped, suffocating warmth rather than direct burning. As temperature climbed, the abdominal region began to sweat excessively, causing severe dehydration and painful intestinal contractions. The digestive organs, highly sensitive to heat changes, reacted violently, cramping, tightening, and sending waves of internal distress that left victims gasping. The executioners monitored the temperature carefully, The aim was not to burn the skin, but to push the core of the body, especially the stomach and intestines, into unbearable stress. As heat built up inside the sealed box, prisoners often felt their insides swelling and churning. The humidity inside the chamber made breathing heavy and thick, turning each minute into a mental battle. The punishment served both interrogation and public demonstration purposes. Heat-induced stomach agony was intense, yet left few visible scars, allowing authorities to reuse the same prisoners for multiple questioning sessions. The heat box was feared for its slow, creeping torment. Pain did not strike instantly, it rose gradually, giving the victim time to imagine what might come next. The psychological torture of being trapped with rising heat made this method one of the most dreaded core body punishments of its era. 8. Forced bloat feeding. One of the most humiliating stomach-based punishments in ancient and medieval legal records was forced bloat feeding. It was widely used in cultures that valued public shame as much as physical pain. The method required the prisoner to consume extreme amounts of water, thin porridge, or bland gruel while bound in an upright position. At first, the punishment seemed harmless, just eating or drinking. But the true torment emerged as the stomach expanded far beyond comfort. As liquid or mush accumulated, the abdominal wall stretched painfully, triggering sharp cramps and overwhelming pressure. The intestines, forced to accommodate more than they could reasonably handle, responded with violent internal spasms. The goal wasn't nourishment, it was distension. Interrogators often timed the intake with rhythmic strikes to the abdomen, not to injure the skin, but to amplify shock waves through the swollen stomach. The bloated pressure made even light impacts feel devastating. Beyond physical pain, forced bloat feeding played deeply on psychological discomfort. The inability to refuse swallowing, the sensation of fullness turning into agony, and the loss of bodily control made prisoners panic. The body naturally rejects extreme stomach expansion, so victims often trembled, sweated, and begged for the process to stop. This punishment was favored because it left few outward marks, yet created extreme internal distress. The pain of an overfilled stomach, cramps, pressure, and nausea was something every person could instinctively understand, making the punishment both effective and terrifying. 7. The belly suspension bind. In several ancient desert and steppe cultures, punishers used a method now referred to as the belly suspension bind. Unlike traditional suspension punishments that affected the arms or shoulders, this technique placed nearly all pressure on the victim's abdomen. The prisoner was tied face down over a curved wooden beam or thick rope, with the stomach resting at the highest point. Arms and legs were secured behind or below, preventing any redistribution of weight. As the body sagged, gravity pressed the full torso downward, forcing the abdominal organs against the hard surface. At first, the discomfort felt like intense pressure, but over time, it grew into sharp, radiating pain as the stomach and intestines compressed. The unnatural position made breathing shallow and pushed the diaphragm into a constant struggle. Every attempt to inhale expanded the gut against the beam, amplifying the discomfort. Interrogators favored this method because it was simple, reusable, and slow. The victim's own body weight was the primary tool of torture. Even muscular individuals could not endure long. The abdomen is not designed to bear pressure for extended periods. The longer the suspension continued, the more the trapped organs cramped, twisted, and shifted painfully. Psychologically, the punishment induced panic. The victim felt as if their insides were collapsing, and the inability to shift position made the sensation unbearable. Belly suspension bind was used not only to punish but to break resolve, proof that the human body can become its own instrument of torment when placed in unnatural positions. 6. The fermentation pit. Among certain agricultural societies, an unusual stomach-focused punishment emerged: the fermentation pit. Used primarily as a slow humiliation method, it involved lowering the prisoner waist deep into a narrow pit containing warm, fermenting plant mash, grains, fruits, or vegetable pulp undergoing natural decomposition. The mixture produced gases and heat as it fermented, creating a thick, rising vapor around the abdomen. While it didn't burn like fire, the warmth and acidity irritated the skin and caused continuous discomfort. But the true torment came from the gases produced inside the pit. As the prisoner inhaled them, they triggered nausea, stomach tightening, and severe intestinal cramps. Victims often vomited from the constant sour smell, which only increased the panic. Digestive organs are extremely reactive to both smell and heat. The fermentation pit weaponized both. The longer someone remained inside, the more the cramped positioning and the rising gases overwhelmed them. Executioners used this punishment to degrade rather than destroy. The pit felt alive, bubbling, hissing, releasing warm gusts that struck the stomach like waves. Prisoners often felt as though the fumes were sinking into their bodies, warring with their intestines from the inside. Beyond the physical discomfort, the fermentation pit played heavily on psychological strain. Being trapped in a living, breathing mass created claustrophobic terror. Former captives described overwhelming stomach spasms and an unending urge to retch. This punishment proved that torment didn't always require blades. Sometimes, nature itself did all the work. 5. The salted belly binding. In coastal and island societies, salt was both a preservative and a punishment tool. One of the most feared stomach-based torments was the salted belly binding. The method began by wrapping the victim's midsection with soaked cloths heavily saturated in mineral-rich brine. The salt mixture was warm, ensuring rapid absorption into the skin. Then, a tight band of rope or leather straps was cinched around the abdomen, compressing the belly and forcing the salt deeper into the tissue. As the minutes passed, the salt irritated the skin, drawing out moisture and causing a burning, tightening sensation. But the real cruelty came from the pressure binding. As the abdomen swelled in reaction to the irritants, the straps dug deeper, squeezing the stomach and intestines. The victim felt waves of hot compression mixed with deep internal cramps. Salt is naturally dehydrating, and when applied in this way, it caused intense thirst and nausea. Prisoners often felt their stomachs twisting and churning as the body struggled to balance the sudden loss of moisture. The bindings amplified every tiny movement. Breathing, coughing, or flinching sent bolts of pain across the torso. The punishment was designed to last hours. Interrogators sometimes re-wet the cloths with fresh brine to restart the burning cycle. While not immediately life-threatening, the salted belly binding wore down even the toughest captives, leaving them mentally exhausted, physically drained, and terrified of every new tightening of the straps. 4. The hanging stone gut drag. Recorded in some mountain clans and early warrior societies, the hanging stone gut drag was a punishment meant to test endurance and obedience. The victim was forced to kneel or stand with a large, smooth stone tied around the waist, hanging low over the stomach. Instead of pressing downward like traditional weight punishments, the stone pulled forward, and this made all the difference. The constant forward drag forced the abdominal muscles into unnatural tension. The stomach was stretched, not compressed. Every attempt to straighten the back or pull the torso upright caused the stone to swing, tugging sharply at the intestines and the muscles holding them in place. Over time, the core of the body began to tremble uncontrollably. Warrior clans used this method to discipline members who broke training rules or betrayed group orders. The punishment wasn't meant to maim, but to exhaust and overwhelm the stomach's stability. The longer the stone hung, the more the digestive organs shifted uncomfortably, sending cramps through the torso. In some versions, the victim had to walk in a slow circle while the stone dragged against the ground. Every step created a jolt that traveled up the gut, making the abdomen feel like it was being yanked from inside. The psychological strain came from the unpredictability. Each movement made the stone swing differently. The hanging stone gut drag proved how deeply the body relies on the abdominal core. When that core is destabilized, even simple standing becomes agony. 3. The digestive twist rack. While classic racks stretched limbs, a lesser-known variation targeted the core of the body, specifically the stomach muscles and lower torso. This device, sometimes called the digestive twist rack, seated the victim on a fixed wooden bench while leather belts wrapped around the abdomen. These belts were connected to a twisting crank positioned behind the prisoner. When turned, the crank slowly tightened the belts, pulling the abdomen inward and upward at the same time. This unnatural torque compressed the stomach while twisting the intestines inside the abdominal cavity. The sensation was not sharp, but deep, an agonizing internal wrenching that grew more intense with each slow rotation. Interrogators favored this device because of its precision. They could stop at any moment, applying just enough internal pressure to overwhelm the victim without causing permanent damage. The twisting motion forced the abdominal organs to shift painfully, making the core muscles seize. Victims often described feeling as though their insides were sliding or turning against each other. The psychological terror was equally severe. Unlike other punishments, where pain comes from the outside, the twist rack made people feel the pain from within in the organs themselves. Each crank became a countdown of dread, increasing pressure, breathlessness, and a burning sensation across the gut. The digestive twist rack proved that torturers understood anatomy far more than their era suggests. They weaponized the body's natural reactions, turning internal pressure into a form of torment far worse than anything visible on the skin. 2. The hot grain stomach bed. In rural regions dependent on grain production, there existed a punishment called the hot grain stomach bed. A shallow wooden trough was filled with freshly heated grain, often rice, barley, or millet, removed directly from cooking pots or drying ovens. The grain wasn't hot enough to burn the skin, but it held a deep, penetrating warmth capable of stressing the body's core. The prisoner was forced to lie shirtless onto the bed of warm grain, with additional sacks of dry grain placed on top of the torso to trap heat against the stomach. The small grains molded perfectly to the shape of the abdomen, delivering uniform warmth into the soft tissues underneath. Over time, the heat seeped deeper into the digestive organs, causing severe cramping and intestinal spasms. Unlike direct fire, which shocks the body, the grain bed delivered a slow, smothering warmth that crept inward. As the temperature persisted, the stomach felt swollen, heavy, and unbearably tense. In some variants, the victim had to remain completely still. Any shift caused the grains to cascade or redistribute, sending new waves of heat into fresh areas of the belly. This unpredictability intensified the mental strain. The method was valued for its subtlety. No marks, no wounds, just relentless, penetrating abdominal suffering. The hot grain stomach bed shows how even common household materials could become instruments of torment when used with patience and intent. 1. The intestinal churn walk. Among nomadic warrior groups, an endurance punishment known as the intestinal churn walk tested physical discipline by attacking the digestive system directly. The victim was fed a large amount of heavy, sluggish food, dense porridge, fatty broth, or thickened grain meals, specifically chosen to sit heavily in the stomach. Immediately afterward, they were forced into an extended walk or march while carrying weighted packs strapped tightly across the midsection. The combination of heavy food and physical movement created a violent internal reaction. As the body jolted with each step, the full stomach bounced and churned, sending waves of nausea and abdominal pain through the victim. The tightly bound pack compressed the torso, preventing proper digestion and intensifying internal cramping. The walk often lasted hours. Victims struggled to keep their balance as dizziness, nausea, and stomach spasms overwhelmed them. The intestines, forced into motion while full, twisted and contracted unpredictably. Some groups even added uneven terrain to amplify the effect. Climbing slopes or stepping over rocks made each internal jolt sharper and more chaotic. The punishment served both disciplinary and symbolic purposes. A warrior who could not control their core, physically or mentally, was seen as weak. Enduring the churn walk demonstrated resilience, while failure meant shame. Unlike more violent methods, the intestinal churn walk used the body's own natural processes against itself. Movement, digestion, and internal pressure combined into a slow, grinding ordeal that tested endurance far more than strength.